The Arabian Racehorse Podcast with Debbie Burt and Gary Capel.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Arabian Racing Podcast. I'm joined today just by Gary Capel.
Hello, Debbie. How are you?
Yeah, very good, very good. And obviously, congratulations, Gary, on your wedding, which seems to have broken the Facebook page on the Arrow website.
Yeah, it was bizarre. I picked my phone up and I was looking at what are all these messages? I was like, well, I didn't tell anybody. So, anyway, yes, I think Jenny put a picture on that, yes, quite a few people liked, and then I got quite a few texts and WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger messages as well. So I think I've replied to everybody, but thank you to everybody for either commenting or getting in touch. It means a lot. Yeah,
that's super. And it looks like you had a wonderful time, and good luck to you and Suleika for the future.
Thank you.
And now we move on to our most recent race, which is the Royal Cavalry Oman International Stakes, a Group 2 over 6 furlongs, formerly known as the Zabeel International, which of course the Royal Cavalry had a great association with some of their best horses in the past, including Al Muhannad, who won it 3 times. And we got to see a new and very unexposed sprint champion putting in a very fast time. Although, to be fair, I think everybody needs to know that the official time wasn't actually recorded, and the time on the Racing Post website is actually a hand time, but it's right. It's pretty accurate anyway. So, what did you make of Bayan Athbar, Gary?
I thought she was impressive. She travelled through the race really well, and I liked how when she was challenged, or Tufan came pretty much alongside, she went right away from her. Right away from him. And yeah, I mean, she's not had that many starts. We pointed out that, they'd thought enough of it to run her a couple of times in Saudi. I'm not sure the dirt was perhaps maybe to her liking, or maybe she wasn't quite ready for that at that stage of her career. But she's come back over here. She won in Belgium. I've still yet to actually watch the replay of that race, but she was very impressive, I thought. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see where they go with her next. She's clearly got the speed for this trip, but she can probably go a bit further as well. So it'll open up a few more options for them now. What kind of rating she'll get on the back of this, I'm not just sure. But yeah, it gives them a lot more options. Phil likes to run horses in that race in Baden-Baden, doesn't he? Which is, it's a Sunday in September, the first or second Sunday in September, I think, isn't it? So maybe that might be an option.
Yeah, and look, the whole family, as we discussed previously, all were very good at a mile and a quarter. So, as we sort of discussed last week, that it's a race that there's not a lot of sprint specialists, and often it's a horses class that sees them through, which is exactly what Tad O'Shea said after the race, which is, she's clearly got a lot of class. And I mean, the race that she won in Belgium was just a maiden, and I think it was over a mile. This was not necessarily going to suit, but it was a brave call by Connections, and she did it well. And I think that there was, certainly more to come. Her ears were pricked when she crossed the line, and she was certainly possibly just slightly easing up a bit as she finished. So you'd like to think that was, really quite a decent performance. Obviously, again, it'll depend on how Stephen views it and what he feels of the horses that were finished in behind.
Yeah, I suppose strictly speaking, looking at the weights and measures of it all, I mean, she was getting 13 pounds, was she? I think it was around about 13 pounds from a horse who's rated 13 pounds inferior to her. So, and that was the horse, that was the horse that she beat into second by 2 1/4 lengths. So it's a pretty tricky race to try and rate, I think. I think she was good value for the victory, and I've no doubt that she'll be able to compete in this level and possibly even Group 1 race if they can find the right race for her. Whether they send her back to Saudi, I'm not sure. It would depend on, she looks a bit more streetwise now than some of those Saudi runs, which I suppose is fair enough. And just looking at the sire obviously was it's handled the dirt, and it's had horses that have handled the dirt as well, perhaps more importantly. So yeah, whether they go back there, I'm not just sure. Whether they try and find some other races abroad where perhaps they might find that the races are slightly less competitive. She's already been proven that she handles her travelling well, having been over to Belgium. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see where they decide to go with her next. But, she's, like I said, she's only had a handful of starts and she certainly appears to be going the right way. So, yeah, interesting to see where they decide to go with the next. Is it the 5th of September or is it the 12th of September, that Baden race? I can never remember.
I don't have it in front of me at the moment. It's chaotic on the
Phil's
table.
obviously...
It is early September anyway, and it's a kind. I mean, it's probably a toss up between going to Baden and probably the new mile race at Haydock that we've got on the 4th, and obviously there's no travelling involved in there, and no doubt she'll get an entry, and Phil will take a view, and Athbasad will take a view when it comes to declaration time, I would imagine.
And that's the type of track that will probably suit her as well, because the mile track there, it's not the longest run to that bend. It's a fairly sweeping turn and then a long home straight, isn't it? So I think that track would probably suit her, obviously draw permitting as well, because you never want to be too wide on those type of races, depending what the ground is as well, of course, too, because traditionally, I'd lived not far from Haydock now, sort of 15 miles away, and the amount of rain that course seems to be so unlucky to get. That's a meeting that can often be run on quite testing grounds. So that would be something else to maybe consider as well.
Yeah, no, of course. And we are theoretically moving into the autumn there, and that race, and of course also Doncaster. As you say, the ground tends to get considerably more testing in those two northern tracks. So it remains to be seen. And I think, a word about the fact that she's 5 and only that was her 4th race. She was quite a backward youngster. She was actually broken in at Phil's, and I saw her when she was 3, and she definitely wasn't ready for running at all. I can see why they held back, and they shipped her out to Saudi to have a couple of starts out of there, including one over the same distance where she didn't really show anything at all. But I think it's interesting that she's a full sister to Mileta Mathbar, who was 4th in what was effectively the trial for this race. And he apparently he's been shipped off to Saudi. So it'll be interesting to see how she progresses. He looked a nice horse to take away from that race, actually. So looks like they've got lots of options. They can certainly step her up in trip, and both Phil and Tad said after the race that she would definitely be better over further, which going on the family traits doesn't seem a surprise at all.
No, it doesn't, and they've got like I said, they've got options now if they want to drop her back, but they know that she's capable over this sort of trip, and just the fact that they tend to go that stride quicker than they would do in just say a handicap for this type of grade. No reason why it should, but it just obviously does, doesn't it? They're slightly better horses, so they're going to go that little bit quicker, and that pace scenario really suited her, and I think what's likely to happen at Haydock would be fairly similar, so that would probably suit her as well.
And I think actually, we're probably going to see quite a few of the horses that ran in this race at least get entries for Haydock, because it's a natural sort of progression to most of these horses would more likely be running over that longer trip anyway. So, and of course, 2 of those who ran on Saturday reappear at Chepstow on Thursday in the Wafba Stallions Cup, which is over a mile. So already saying that, the 6 furlongs and a mile trip are compatible for certainly, the Arabian horses that we've got in this country. And the top weight there is Mizuna, who of course finished 5th at Newbury.
Yes, was beaten what, 7-ish probably lengths in the end, maybe about 7 lengths, wasn't it? We know that this type of trip's going to be better for her. She's won over 10, she's won over 9.5 a couple of times at Wolverhampton, and she's won over a mile at Chelmsford. I suppose there's still a slight nagging doubt that what you would probably say that all the winning form, at least anyway, has come on the artificial surfaces. She's never won on the turf, has she? So
she won in Belgium on quick.
Oh, she did win in Belgium, right? Of course she did, yeah. But anyway, top weight to carry in this race won't be easy, because for me, the 0 to 80 bracket is probably our most competitive bracket. It probably has been for sort of 5, maybe even 10 years. You could have maybe stretched it to the 0 to 85, 0 to 90 bracket possibly a few years ago when we had a few more horses. But this for me has always been the most competitive grade that we have And, it looks it, doesn't it? I mean, we've got 14 horses showing up. Obviously, it's a fairly quick reappearance for Mazuna. Adam Farah, who is based, I think, now with William Haggis, or certainly has had a few rides for William Haggis, at least anyway, is on board. He's not recently, he has fairly recently come over from Ireland as well. Just checking, trying to think if I'm not sure if he has had any brides. I don't think he has on this breed of on the Arabians, has he? So
no, not on the Arabians. There's quite a few jockeys having their first ride on Arabians, actually.
I couldn't remember Fame McManaman unless she was involved in that series, and Angus Villiers and Theodore Ladd right down at the bottom. He might have done, actually, but there's a few others, the likes of George Bass as well, that are sort of perhaps unfamiliar names on the breed, but unless they've rid of them in the UAE. But again, looking at some of the fairly inexperienced riders in terms of apprentices that they're riding in this race, I'd probably suggest that they haven't. So, but I mean, it's so competitive, isn't it? You're trying to work out which one's the first string from Shadwell of their 6. I didn't think was easy. I know the caps are probably going to give us a little bit of a clue, but sometimes they take those things with a little bit of a pinch of salt nowadays. I would probably guess that Farasar is perhaps the first string for James and Luke Morris, who I thought obviously finished behind Mazayunar and Nadal Shiva in that race at Wolverhampton back in May. And I think the step back down in trip will definitely suit her. I was impressed with how she won at Wolverhampton on her debut, beating Aldana earlier on in the season. And the first pair that they came a long way clear. So she's perhaps my idea of where I was looking to go in terms of a winner, I think, for this race. But you've got other horses that have been in good form. I mean, Abkari won at Doncaster last time out. You've also got Balkis as well in there for Phil, who's ran in both those races. I mean, looked as though they're almost needed in that Mazayunar race, funny enough, at Wolverhampton on seasonal return. Then went close over 2 miles at Doncaster behind Jadail and was third back there on the most recent outing as well, when possibly, I don't think, maybe quite getting home, which seems an odd thing to say about a horse who finished second over further the time before. But I think the step back down in trip will be more in her favour. There are so many others we could go through. I mean, Altabari's been in decent nick. Auto, first start for New Connections. Probably maybe slightly might find this a bit too competitive, maybe. I'm not sure. That's one of the Pardones again, probably shouldn't say that, but there we go. And you've got a few others as well. Paramount Angel, who's got decent form here. And Jarl has in the James Owen Racing Club Silks, who's been a bit disappointing, but has dropped down to a decent mark, I think. So yeah, very, very competitive fare. But as I say, I think you'd expect that for this type of grade nowadays. I think this is probably our most competitive grade of race the 0 to 80 bracket that we probably have, and 14 runners probably proves that. Yeah,
absolutely. And are you still in the James Owen Racing Club itself? Because you've got Seraphim Forter and you've got 3 options running for you in this case.
I would have had 3 options. I'm not. No, I'm not in the James Owen Racing Club. Just the other syndicate that was recently put together with the RC and BlackRock Racing.
Right. Okay. I mean, it's a shame, really. They had such a good season to start with, and I guess horses do move up and down the handicaps, and you have to wait for them to come down. But as you say, it's a massively competitive race, and a bit of a pin sticker, isn't it, in some respects? As you say, Paramount Angel, course and distance winner on 2 occasions, but at the age of 10. There are these, as you mentioned, Farasar and Abkari. They're both very, very lightly raced, and you would expect them to improve on what they've shown so far. And sorry, go on, Gary. You're right.
I was just going to say, that they are very unexposed, aren't they? When you look again, we've got that nice mix of unexposed horses and the horses that we know plenty about. You've got the horses on the up, the horses that are perhaps slightly on the decline, and the horses that are on the decline have got down to that mark where they're going to be very competitive. So it's a tough old puzzle to try and solve, that is for sure.
Yes, indeed. So we will enjoy watching that race. And you're still off games with us, aren't you? You won't be at Chepstow.
Yeah, I'm back for Haydock and Doncaster. So yeah, I won't be there on Thursday. I think it's John Blantz will be in the box on Thursday, so I've got to forward him the race card when I get it.
Well, I hope you'll be around to join us when we review the race, and we'll be looking at another maiden, which will be run at Lingfield on the 25th of August, sponsored by Rochdale's Veterinary. They're back in the sponsorship chair with us this year, so we'll be looking forward to that. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.